Hello everyone, welcome to Court with Krissy. Gramps is here to evict his granddaughter and her occupant friend, aka her fiance. What does Gramps have? No rent and lease and a bad memory. I kind of believe most of what the granddaughter is saying. FYI, somewhere in the middle there's about 2 minutes where it went quiet, so I kind of cropped it out. We didn't miss much. I hope you like it. Court with Krissy is now in session.
Okay, this is case number 25417 LT. We were here back a couple of weeks ago in which the defendant had requested time for financial assistance. Ms. Walton, did you file for financial assistance?
I made attempts to file assistance with DHS, but was unable to receive it as we don't have any rental agreement. Everything was verbal. There was nothing on paper.
Okay. Will the parties please raise their right hand? Mr. Walton, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Everybody? And I apologize. I called the plaintiff Mr. Walton. It's actually Mr. Lowing. I apologize.
Okay,
Mr. Lowing, how much are you? Let me take a quick look here.
Your Honor, I have papers that the bailiff could give to you, just some information that we have, because it's everything that we've collected. Like I said, all the initial agreements were verbally made.
We can get to that in a second. Mr. Lowing, how much are you claiming is owing in rent?
well, I sold my home in Florida and built a house up here to subsidize to rent it or sell it to subsidize my fixed income. Before the house was ready, my granddaughter started moving in. They moved in before the house was ready, the first granddaughter. She lived there for a couple of years, never paid rent, never paid expenses. This granddaughter moved in before the first granddaughter moved out. Now she don't pay any rent. I asked them to save $250 a month, so that when taxes were due, it would be paid. When taxes were due, they informed me there was no money. They weren't going to pay me any money. She keeps telling me that I'm her blood relation, and why am I doing this to her? They have not paid a dime since they've been there. And she has her occupant friend, who's 20-some years her senior, don't work, lives there in my house, and won't pay rent.
Was there an agreed amount monthly rent?
No, it was just the $250 a month, so that there would be enough for taxes, which I have the paperwork. I paid the taxes, which they were supposed to have money for.
Do you have anything in writing saying that?
It's the $250.
Yes.
I have my daughter who's a witness.
Okay, but I'm asking you right now, do you have anything in writing stating that?
On the $250, no.
Okay. How long had they lived in the house?
They've lived there since October, but the other granddaughter lived there for over 2 years, and I haven't received
Okay,
one dime
but this granddaughter only lived there since October
since October.
of 2024.
Yes,
Okay. And it's, your testimony is they were just supposed to put aside $250 a month, beginning when?
in October,
Okay,
so that there would be $1,126.03 to pay the property taxes. They
1,000,
came due on the 28th of February.
1,126.03.
Yes. They refuse to pay. They won't pay rent. They won't move. They won't work. And I had to pay the property taxes out of what they left me, out of my savings. That house was supposed to subsidize my fixed income.
Can you explain to me the circumstances in which the $250 was agreed upon?
That was averaged over a year so that insurance and taxes there would be enough when they came due to be paid.
Okay, but how was it that you guys, and I'm not saying that you did, but from your testimony, I'm saying, how was it that you describe for me the conversation in which you had the $250 agreement?
With my daughter, her and I made the agreement. She's privy to this agreement. And we averaged out the taxes and the insurance for a year and divided it by 12, came up with $250.
Other than your daughter, who did you talk to about the $250?
Probably just my daughter,
Okay,
my granddaughter.
this granddaughter,
Yes,
Ms. Walton?
yes.
Okay, and when did you have that conversation with her?
Back in October when they first moved in.
Okay, and what was her response to you saying that you needed $250 set aside?
It was agreed upon,
How was it agreed upon?
just between a verbal agreement, my daughter, my granddaughter and myself.
What did she say to agree?
I do not remember the exact words
Okay, what makes you think there was an agreement?
because my daughter and I and my granddaughter agreed. I mean, we're humans, we talked about it.
Did you ever request proof that the $250 was being set aside?
No,
Was the $250 to be paid to you directly or just set aside?
it was supposed to be set aside until the taxes were due on the 28th of February, and I paid them.
And so the property's here in Wexford County, right?
Yes,
Do you have a winter and a summer tax?
yes,
Okay, and so the summer tax would have already been paid.
I paid the taxes on the 28th of February.
So that's
Thought that was the winter tax.
so that's the winter tax,
Right,
right? Okay. And was the amount that you say agreed upon, was that only $250?
yes,
And who was responsible for utilities? Sorry about that.
We do use the well water, but we pay our own electric, gas, and internet. But due to the fact that Leroy's cabin and the subject home are on the same power meter, we have been paying his electric bill since November of 2024. And I do have some of those bills with us. They started out low and are now reaching almost $600 because he has 2 space heaters running full time outside in an uninsulated well house and a hot water heater closet. And because he keeps both of those running, it makes the electric high, which we pay and he does not pay. We also have a bunch of things that I have photos. The verbal agreement, we actually moved in September 22nd. The verbal agreement at that time was that we were going to refurbish the home in exchange for rent. And I have a description of all different things that we did. There was a lot of debris outside the home. There was a mouse infestation. We made sure that we got the correct poisons. We have completely redone 1 bathroom and bedroom. There's just quite a big list here, all the different things that we have done. We have an itemized write-up from my fiance on what the cost for those would be, the materials. It has also been stated by Leroy that the reason he wants us evicted is because he says the property is maintained and ready to rent. But there are also still a lot of issues. We are currently living in the house with the water heater leaking, which is a fire hazard. We just have a fan on it because we don't have anywhere else to go at the moment. He has been made aware of this situation and is refusing to change it until we leave. There are many issues with all the doors, the back and front doors not opening and closing properly, with many of the windows. So even if we were to leave, there is a lot that needs to be done. And that was the point, is we were going to fix things for him in exchange for living there. Well, on or about the third week of January, there were some very cold nights. We left our faucet running, knowing that it would avoid freezing the pipes. We received a call from Leroy late, it was January 21st, asking us if we had running water, because he did not. At this time, my fiance, Stephen Nevy, it was at 10:30 at night on January 21st, went outside to help him because Leroy was on the ground outside the hot water closet, unable to get off the ground on his own. He was using expletives and throwing fists as Stephen tried to help him up. When he realized how angry he was, he decided to walk away to avoid physical altercation. After that, we went back inside and we did call my mother. She's unfortunately like a mediator between us. Sorry, I'm talking loud, I'm nervous. About a week later, on January 30th, is when Leroy decided that he was going to give us the notice to quit to recover possession of property and the demand for possession, non-payment of rent. We were told verbally by him that if we wanted to stay, we needed to start paying him $1,000 a month, or we had to get out. That was the first that we had ever heard of anything like that. And it's not the original verbal agreement that we made in September. We have been actively trying to find apartments. We have been turned down. We have communicated with him that we are doing everything in our power to get out, but are denying to pay him anything because that was not the original verbal agreement. And as I said, it's not much. I do have a packet if the bailiff wanted to give you that shows some of the photos and the amounts of labor and everything that we did.
So my understanding from your testimony is there was not a written agreement. And from your perspective, the agreement was you guys live in the house, you pay to bring the house back up to standards, rent-free, you pay utilities.
Yes.
Okay.
At the time that we moved in on September 22nd, and my sister was still there with her 3 children, she was going to provide the utilities, the food, and the toiletries, and there was going to be no rent. And our sole purpose was to use our income that we did have for materials for the house to refurbish it, our time and money that we had.
Was that the agreement with your sister?
That was the agreement with Leroy and my mother, Ruth Walton, that we had made verbally. Because as family members, he is my biological grandfather on my mother's side, we did not think that there needed to be, which obviously we were wrong.
So as far as who's paying for the groceries and stuff like that, that doesn't matter here. What I'm tasked with is to determine whether or not there's rent due and what we do about that. So from what I understand, your testimony is it would have been late January, early February is the first time you heard anything about a rental payment?
Yes, and in for the property taxes, we were not notified of the property taxes until the first week of January. We were not notified by Leroy, but by my mother, Ruth. And my mother, Ruth, does have power of attorney for Leroy Lowing. So the reason that we were going through her is because he said to her, one day this property is going to be yours. You're going to be the landlord. In practice of that, I want you to do it now. That's why everything has gone through.
Did you hear that conversation?
I did not hear the physical conversation between
okay.
my mother and my grandfather.
So you can't tell me what something was said outside of your hearing.
Right. I just know that from what my mother said.
Yeah, you can't.
He is the one.
You can't tell me that. So we can only go with your negotiations. So I guess the question I have is to what end were you going to be there? I mean, at what point?
we're going to be there long enough to get the house completely redone so that he could have somebody else renting there. And the money that we had saved up from not paying rent, we could go get a house.
And so who was gonna set that standard that the house had been redone enough to move somebody in?
It would have been between, Stephen Nevy and.
I can
Leroy
answer
Loewen.
some of these out.
Well, just hold on.
It would have been between Stephen Nevy, who's been a building licensed builder for 25 years, and Leroy Loewen. There wasn't really a set date. We took one problem as it came.
So I guess my question is then, are we renovating it to be a one-room rustic cabin, or are we renovating it to be the Taj Mahal? How do I know where that separates?
May I?
Oh, she's got the stand right now.
There wasn't much discussion over to the extent of how much we were renovating it, just the fact that the carpets needed to be ripped up because they had been destroyed by children and lots of things. There was a lot of the house that obviously needed work. We were not trying to knock down walls and remodel. We were just trying to make it more inhabitable to someone who was paying rent.
But was there agreement as to where that would happen? I mean, at what, because from where I'm coming from, what it sounds like is whether or not there's a monthly rental amount, I haven't decided. But from your testimony, it sounds like you were gonna live there, you were gonna bring it up to par, and then what happens?
So we moved in September 22nd.
Okay, but what was the agreement? So when the house gets up to a suitable standard, and I say that in quotes because we don't know what that is,
Right,
what happens after that point?
we would move out,
That was the agreement,
yes.
but there's no indication as to what a suitable standard is.
No, one of the things that threw us for a loop is it was supposed to be me, Stephen, my sister Rachel and her children all living there, working through things together. Then when she moved out on November 5th and we had to cover the cost of the utilities from $500 and $700 a month, it took away from our costs to remodel the house. And then when we got the eviction notice from him at the end of January, we stopped renovating altogether because it was not pleasant. Like I said, there have been,
Was there a time period in which the completion of the renovation was to take place?
no.
Okay.
Basically, because we are family, he told us that we could take as long as we wanted. There was no set time.
Well,
For us to move out.
you say basically, was that something that was said, or is that just something you've interpreted?
I guess it's something I interpreted. I don't remember all exact conversations, what was said, and there has been a lot of back and forth between different people, so no. It's just my interpretation as a grandfather and us remodeling was that we would just keep going till we were done and then move on from there.
Okay. Anything else?
Basically, just reiterating the fact that even though, you know, there has been tension between us, we still make sure to help clean the yard, we still get his mail, we are still trying to be civil in this and avoid further issues, and I believe he is not.
Anybody, any other evidence or anything you'd like me to hear?
I don't think so. Just have a few photos, but it's like, again, it's not very much.
Mr. Loewen, you had the chance to rebut anything that was said.
Well, first,
But let's keep it to the rent and the house, not the whole family thing going on.
okay. The reason I started the eviction thing is when they were presented with they were supposed to budget the 250. And they told me they didn't have it, they wouldn't pay me. I have a contractor ready to go in and make the house ready for another renter. I would like them out so I can fix the house. They won't go so I can fix the house. The electric bill, I don't know, I have a little cabin and everything in there is gas, except my refrigerator and my CPAP machine. It can't be $600 worth of electricity. We were gonna replace the hot water heater as soon as she moved out, when we worked on the house. As far as all these other agreements with groceries and everything, I never heard anything like that.
Okay.
So where the electricity is going, it's not going in my little 420 square foot cabin.
Okay.
And there are probably some other things I should answer, but I can't remember everything she said. But as far as remodeling the house, yes, that was agreed that they would do some of that, plus budget the $250.
Was there ever any type of conversation about how long it would take to remodel the house?
Not that I recall.
Was there any conversation as to at what standard the house would be considered remodeled?
No.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm sure I forgot something, but I can't remember anything more. I'm too old, I guess.
Okay. Well, this court does present some issues, or this case does present some issues for the court, and it's a great demonstration of good intentions gone bad, and why it's so important in these types of situations is to have some sort of rental agreement and written agreements. Well, in order to have a contract per se, and I say that in quotes because it is possible to have a verbal contract, there has to be a meeting of the minds. And I don't find today that there was a meeting of the minds. I have one person saying that we had this agreement for $250 a month. I have another person saying that we have no agreement. We were just supposed to stay there and fix the house up. But even if I were to take that at its word, there is no end to the contract. This contract would go on in perpetuity and would never stop. In theory, I could remove one ceiling tile a month out of the house. I'm doing renovations, but it might take me 3 years to do that. So I find that there was not a contract between the parties as far as rent. So therefore, I find that Mr. Loewen, you are not entitled to any back rent or any future rent. But what I do find, though, however, is that because there was not a agreement in place as far as whether this was a year tenancy or a month to month, because there is no written agreement, I have to go with the presumption that this is a month to month lease, and a month to month lease can be terminated with sufficient notice. I find that Mr. Loewen has provided that sufficient notice. As such, I find that he is entitled to the right of recovery to the property. I'm not ordering a monetary judgment, but I am ordering that the property be vacated within 10 days. If it's not vacated within 10 days, a writ of eviction can be requested and a court officer come and physically remove you from the property. I'm sorry that it's come to this. Clearly, there's some family issues going on, but the law is what the law is. So I hereby order that the plaintiff has the right to recover possession of the property. He can request an order of eviction after April 7th, 2025. And a money judgment does not enter at this time. You can both go out to the front window where you check in and get a copy of the judgment.
I'm very happy with your decision.
I'm glad you are, because I'm not happy issuing it. So court next calls the case of Citibank versus Dina Anderson.